When I think about how it all began, I always come back to that moment in the university dorm hallway. The day I carried out my last box of things and slammed the trunk of my beat-up Honda Civic, my brother Ethan standing there with his arms crossed, dressed like he'd stepped out of some Wall Street catalog with his pressed shirt, shiny leather shoes, and perfectly combed hair like he had already earned the world's approval. His tone sharp as he asked, "You're really doing this? Walking away from a degree, from a future, from everything Mom and Dad sacrificed for?" I remember gripping the keys so tightly they left marks in my palm, my voice shaking as I forced out the words, "I'm not cut out for this, Ethan." Sitting in lecture halls, regurgitating theories I don't care about, it feels like drowning. I want to build something real. He let out a cold laugh, the kind that said he had already written me off, and smirked. "Build? You don't even know what you're doing. You think the world is waiting for another dropout story? This isn't Silicon Valley, Alex, this is real life. And in real life, dropouts fail." His words cut deeper than I'd ever admit, but I shoved the duffel bag into the back seat, muttered, "Watch me," and drove away with more doubt than determination in my chest. That phrase, "watch me," became my silent mantra through nights of surviving on cheap noodles while coding in the corner of a friend's basement, through double shifts at a call center just to pay for servers, through hours staring at a half-broken laptop with bloodshot eyes and fingers numb from typing. But Ethan never really watched, not in a way that mattered. At family dinners he bragged about his professors calling him the future of finance and internships that promised six-figure salaries, while Mom's eyes darted between us with worry and Dad cleared his throat, trying to smooth over the silence when I admitted I was still working on something. Something sounded vague, even to me, but I had this vision gnawing at me. A machine learning platform that could simplify logistics for small businesses, managing inventory, shipping, and tracking automatically. I could almost see it running in my head, even if no one else could. I wasn't alone though. I had Matteo and Priya, two friends just as restless and reckless as me, and together our so-called office was a freezing garage in the winter where we wore gloves while coding and a suffocating sauna in the summer where our backs stuck to plastic chairs. We had no investors, no credibility, and nothing but belief that somehow we were building something that mattered. After one brutal 18-hour stretch of debugging a system crash that refused to fix itself, I collapsed on the floor groaning, "Maybe Ethan's right. Maybe I'm just some dropout fool chasing a dream that's never going to work." Priya pulled a blanket over me and said with quiet fire, "Then let's be fools together, because I'd rather fail chasing something real than succeed living someone else's dream." Her words snapped something back into me, and I got up, dragged myself to the desk, and kept typing. The first prototype was ugly, clunky, and crashed more often than it ran, but it existed, and to me that meant everything. Ethan came by once unannounced, probably to gloat, and when he saw it he raised an eyebrow, burst out laughing, and said, This is what you threw your education away for? God, Alex, you never learn." I wanted to scream at him, to shout that he didn't understand, but instead I swallowed the fury and muttered, "Give it time." He didn't believe me, nobody did, but I believed myself, and that made all the difference. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life, and yet when I look back, they were also the ones that forged me into who I became, because building something from nothing isn't just about ideas and code, it's about surviving the nights when the bank account shows less than $20 and your friends ask why you don't just get a real job. Ethan never failed to remind me of that choice either, dropping comments during every family call like, "So, Alex, still playing around in that garage of yours?" Or, "Some people work for a living, you know," his smug tone dripping with the superiority of a man on the fast track in finance while I was scraping together money to keep servers online. Still, every time he mocked me, I felt this stubborn heat in my chest, like his doubt was fuel, like every insult was another reason to prove him wrong. Matteo and Priya felt it too. When investors ignored us, when our pitches got shot down with lines like, "This will never scale," or "You kids don't have what it takes," we went back to the garage and worked twice as hard. We lived off takeout and slept in shifts, our desks covered in empty cups and scribbled diagrams, Matteo muttering over code, Priya sketching interface designs, me bouncing between them trying to keep the vision alive. There were days I wanted to quit, like the time a beta test with a small business completely crashed their order system and I had to spend 3 straight nights fixing it while the owner screamed over the phone, or the time we discovered a competitor had just raised $10 million for something eerily similar to our idea. "We can't win," I whispered one night, head buried in my hands. Priya slammed her laptop shut and snapped, "No, Alex, they can't win, because they don't have us, they don't have the heart we've poured into this." Matteo nodded and said, "Every empire looks impossible until it's built. One step at a time." Their belief carried me when mine faltered, and slowly, painfully, we began to see progress. The platform became smoother, crashes less frequent, features more powerful. We convinced a small logistics company to pilot it, and when they cut their costs by nearly 30% in 3 months, word started to spread. Not fast, not glamorous, but enough to give us hope. Meanwhile, Ethan's life seemed perfect from the outside: suit promotions, glossy photos of rooftop parties, LinkedIn posts about thriving in finance that mom and dad proudly shared with every cousin and neighbor. At dinners he'd raise his glass and joke, to real success, his eyes flicking toward me, daring me to react. One night I finally snapped. "You think success is wearing a suit and reading stock tickers?" I shot back. "I'm building something that changes lives, Ethan. Something people actually use." He leaned back, smirked, and said, "Sure, Alex, keep telling yourself that. But at the end of the day, clients want stability, not dreams. You're still just a dropout playing pretend." His words burned, but that night I wrote an email to 10 more potential clients instead of sleeping, and by the end of the month, one of them signed on. That tiny contract felt like oxygen, proof that maybe, just maybe, we were clawing our way out of the shadows. Still, the financial strain was crushing. We couldn't pay ourselves salaries, I was drowning in debt, and the garage felt like it might collapse from the weight of our desperation. Ethan never offered help, only criticism. When Mom asked him once if he could introduce me to someone in his network, he scoffed, "Why waste their time? He won't last another year." Those words found me at 3 a.m. while I was debugging, my fingers trembling with exhaustion, and I whispered into the silence, "I'll last as long as it takes." And I meant it. The turning point came almost by accident, a single email buried in the spam folder from a mid-sized retail chain desperate to fix their broken supply system, and when I called them back and offered to run a demo for free just to prove our platform worked, the manager laughed at first but agreed, saying, "Fine, kid, show me what you've got." That week was a blur, me and Matteo patching bugs while Priya redesigned the interface until her hands cramped, and when we finally launched the demo live, I thought my heart might stop watching their orders update in real time, shipments tracked with precision, inventory synced across locations without human error. The manager's jaw literally dropped. This actually works," he said, disbelief melting into excitement, and when he signed a year-long contract the next day, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried, not because of the money, it was modest, but because it was proof we weren't crazy, that all the nights of ridicule and sacrifice weren't wasted. Word spread quickly after that, one referral leading to another, small contracts piling up into something substantial, and for the first time we had steady revenue. We upgraded from the freezing garage to a shabby shared office with peeling paint and squeaky chairs, but to us it felt like a palace. I'll never forget the day I walked in and saw our logo on the glass door, Nexus Core, and I ran my fingers over it like it was solid gold. Investors who had once ignored my emails now started reaching out, curious about how we were gaining traction, and I stood in those meetings with sweaty palms but a steady voice, saying, "We're not just a product, we're a movement. We're here to make logistics simple and affordable for businesses who've been ignored by the giants." We secured our first round of funding, small but enough to scale, enough to finally pay ourselves a little, enough to breathe without choking on debt. Ethan, of course, acted unimpressed. At a family gathering when Dad proudly mentioned that Nexus Core had landed a national client, Ethan smirked and said, "Cute, but call me when you're playing in the big leagues." I wanted to snap back, but instead I smiled and said, "Don't worry, you'll hear about us soon." What I didn't say was that we had just signed a deal with one of the largest shipping companies in the country, a deal that would put us on the map. That launch was chaos, servers crashing under the weight of data, our small team working around the clock with pizzas stacked high and music blasting just to stay awake, But when the system stabilized and the client announced publicly that Nexus Core had cut their inefficiencies by 40%, the floodgates opened. Suddenly we weren't begging for attention, attention was chasing us. Calls from Fortune 500s, interviews with tech magazines, invitations to conferences where I stood on stage under bright lights and told our story, the dropout who wouldn't quit. Our valuation skyrocketed, past $50 million, then $100 million, numbers I couldn't even process when I was still the kid who once counted coins for gas. Strangers congratulated me, reporters asked for sound bites, but when I looked at Ethan across the dinner table, all I saw was the same smirk, only now with something darker in his eyes, envy. He still wore the tailored suits, still posted pictures of rooftop cocktails with colleagues, still spoke with the air of someone who thought the world owed him respect, but I caught the cracks, the flicker in his expression when people asked me about Nexus Core instead of him, the way he tightened his jaw when Mom said she was proud of me. One evening he cornered me after dinner, his voice low and sharp. "Don't get cocky, Alex. Money comes and goes. Stability is what matters, and I have that. You're still just a dropout riding a bubble." I stared at him, calm for once, and replied, "Maybe. But even if the bubble bursts, I built it myself. Can you say the same?" He didn't answer, just walked away, shoulders stiff, and I realized that no matter how much I achieved, in his eyes I'd always be the dropout. But deep down, I sensed something else too, that his perfect world wasn't as stable as he wanted us to believe, and sooner or later, it would crack. The cracks in Ethan's perfect life widened faster than even I expected, though at first it was just whispers at family dinners, small things he tried to brush off like Mom asking why he seemed distracted or Dad noting that Ethan's firm was in the news for making aggressive moves in the market, but Ethan laughed it away, saying, "Risk is what separates winners from losers," with that same smug tone he'd always used on me. I didn't press, though deep down I remembered every night I had stayed up worrying about whether our servers would survive, every ounce of sweat that went into earning our stability, and I knew risk wasn't something to brag about, it was something you respected. Then one morning, I woke up to a flood of texts from old classmates, articles blowing up online, headlines screaming, "Prestigious investment firm collapses amid market crash," and when I clicked the link my stomach dropped because there it was. Ethan's firm, gutted, lawsuits pending, clients demanding answers, millions lost overnight. For a second I just stared, trying to process the irony, that the brother who once called me reckless was now at the center of ruin. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was Ethan himself. His voice was ragged, nothing like the confident man I'd always known. "Alex, it's gone," he whispered, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. "The firm, the money, they're blaming me. My license, my career, it's all slipping away." I sat in silence, remembering every smirk, every insult, every dinner where he dismissed me as nothing but a dropout, and I could have rubbed it in, I could have said, maybe being a dropout isn't the worst thing after all, but instead I swallowed hard and said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. You'll figure it out." He let out a bitter laugh that broke halfway. "Figure it out? You don't get it, Alex. I have nothing left. Nothing." Those words haunted me the rest of the day, and when I saw him the following weekend at Mom and Dad's, it was like looking at a different man, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling as he tried to sip water. Mom hovered near him, whispering, "It'll be okay, sweetheart," while Dad paced the room, muttering about reputations and lost trust. Ethan finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time there was no arrogance, just exhaustion. "How did you do it?" he asked quietly, his voice barely more than a rasp. "How did you make it work when everyone thought you'd fail?" I didn't know how to answer at first, because part of me wanted to scream that I made it work because I didn't quit, because I didn't have the safety net of a firm or a degree, because every failure was a lesson instead of a career-ending scandal. But instead I sat down across from him and said, "I didn't give up, Ethan. That's it. I fell 100 times, but I kept getting back up. I didn't chase shortcuts. I built something people needed, and I kept going even when no one believed in me." His eyes welled up, and he pressed his palms against them, whispering, "I judged you so hard. I thought I was better because I had the degree, the firm, the stability. But you built something real. I don't even know who I am without all of it. Hearing him say that felt strange, almost surreal, because for years I had carried the weight of his judgment, but now here he was, stripped bare, the pedestal gone. Mom put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Alex, maybe you can help your brother. Teach him what you've learned." For a long time I just sat there, looking at him, and finally I nodded. "I can't fix what happened, Ethan," I said, "but I can show you what it means to start over. You'll see, it isn't the end." He gave me a weak, grateful smile, and in that moment the years of rivalry, the bitterness, the insults, they all faded into something else, something closer to forgiveness, though not yet complete. I knew then that the world had turned upside down, not because I wanted revenge, but because fate had a way of humbling us all. In the weeks that followed Ethan's downfall, our family dynamics shifted in ways I never expected, because for years he had been the star, the example, the one everyone pointed to when they wanted to talk about success, and I had been the shadow, the dropout, the dreamer who no one believed in. But now those roles were gone, flipped upside down, and all that was left was the raw truth of who we really were. Ethan spent most days at home, drowning in paperwork from lawsuits and phone calls with lawyers, his once bustling social life vanishing overnight as colleagues distanced themselves and so-called friends stopped answering his calls. I visited him often, sometimes just to sit in silence while he stared at the floor, sometimes to talk about small things like food or movies, because I knew that if I pushed too hard he'd crumble. One night, he broke down completely, clutching his head and whispering, "I don't know how to live without the title, the firm, the respect. I feel like nothing." I sat across from him, remembering all the times I'd felt that exact same way when people dismissed me, when investors laughed me out of rooms, when he himself had called me worthless. "You're not nothing, Ethan," I said firmly, "you just tied your identity to things that can vanish. You have to build something from within, something no one can take from you." He looked at me with tears streaming down his face, and for the first time I think he really understood what I had been trying to prove all those years, not to him but to myself. That resilience mattered more than titles, that grit mattered more than degrees, that building something real from nothing left you unshakable even when storms came. Slowly, he started to heal, not in leaps but in small steps, helping me with basic financial projections for Nexus Core, offering advice where he still had expertise, learning from me in return about humility, patience, and vision. Our parents watched with cautious hope, Mom often whispering to me, "I've got my boys back," and Dad nodding silently, his pride less about who wore the shinier suit and more about the fact that we were finally standing side by side instead of tearing each other down. Nexus Core kept growing, hitting milestones I once thought were impossible, our valuation climbing, our impact spreading across industries. But none of that compared to the moment when Ethan stood beside me at a conference months later, not as the brother who once mocked me but as someone humbled, someone supportive, someone proud. When I introduced him to a colleague as, "my brother Ethan," the one who always challenged me to be better, he gave me a small, grateful smile, and I knew he understood that it wasn't an insult, it was the truth. His doubt had once been my fire, and without it, maybe I wouldn't have fought so hard. The story had come full circle, from the day he called me a dropout to the day he admitted he had lost everything, and somewhere in between, I had built not just a company but a version of myself that no one could dismiss. That night, as we left the conference together, Ethan nudged me lightly and said, "You know, Alex, I used to think you were crazy. Now, I think you're the bravest person I know." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Brave or stupid, still not sure which," I said, and he laughed, a real laugh, not the condescending one from years ago, but a laugh of brothers who had finally found each other again. And in that moment, walking side by side into the night, I realized that success wasn't the $100 million valuation, it wasn't the interviews or the investors or the headlines. Success was surviving every doubt, every failure, every sneer, and still rising, still believing, still building. Success was forgiving the brother who had once called me a dropout, and discovering that in the end, even broken empires could lead to stronger bonds.